Live from the Washington, D.C. area, all empowered citizens need to know about intelligent use of resources, smart governance, inclusive communities, smart industry, and healthy, thriving urbanization. This is Smart Sustainability, the TV talk about shaping a sustainable future in the digital age with Nicolette DeVidar. The universe is built on geometric patterns. They represent the foundation and the structure of what is. Everything in nature is built on that very same pattern. Our negligence, limited knowledge, or ignorance of it causes many disharmonies that we all feel, particularly now. You may have heard of sacred geometry, Metatron's cube, the flower of life, or you may think it's all bogus and assign it to the esoteric corner. Fact is, not one of us hasn't noticed that the polarity we're currently in is getting stronger and stronger on both sides and on about every subject. And that remaining stuck in that polarity isn't helping anyone, and it doesn't get us anywhere. As long as we try to convince or force a viewpoint on another person, we remain in a paradigm that in nature doesn't end or stay there. Because nature transcends. It's written in its governance structure, and it's available to us once we open our eyes. So how can we transcend the paradigm of polarity? Can the cube perhaps help us transition to better times? Our topic tonight. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Nicolette DeVidar. When you look at the political landscape, the economy, inflation, the financial system, our current understanding of democracy, most of us, independent of sides or beliefs, say we've had enough. Hearing the gridlock positions most people find themselves in and the daily drama amplified in news media with manipulation and also putting more fuel in it every day, it's hard to envision a way out without a major clash, violence, or other ugly scenarios on the horizon. So we're inviting you this evening to take a step back and see how opposites are actually a starting point or can be a starting point to transform. Because opposites share the same essence, only on opposite ends of the spectrum. So when we understand a bit more of the structure of the universe, the governing principles of the universe, we understand that everything has a purpose and no opposite really is in vain. And that even opposites trace back and connect to the same origin if you follow through. So once we see that, perhaps then we understand how irrelevant all this quibbling that's going on right now is. Now, I'm not saying you should give up your position or not hold your ground that you feel strongly about, but I am inviting you to look beyond. I hear people often say, well, you won't convince them because we take a larger view on perspectives here in the show. But convince them usually means trying to convince someone else. And my reply is that's not what it's about. As long as we try to convince someone of something, we act out of duality and remain in that state of duality. That means remaining stuck on a journey that could be so much more if we opened up. Universal structure is built to transcend. We see that in geometry. The cube is an underlying pattern found throughout the universe. It's essential for creation, stability, and balance. It's also the very structure of transformation. And how that applies, we'll show you in the show. Once we give up the need to convince someone and instead have respect for another's opinion, though we may disagree, we actually may get somewhere. This is the nature of true freedom and free will. And how that works and how governance beyond polarity may look like is what we want to explore tonight. Joining me here in the studio is Romy Schwartz. He's author of UCube, a modeling tool that might help understand how to transcend the quibble of gridlock viewpoints by accessing another dimension visualized by the cube. And joining us via Zoom is Rajinder Joel, a digitization and governance consultant located in Switzerland with a wealth of knowledge on governance. He consulted UNESCO's Knowledge Society Division and other NGOs working within the framework of Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations Agenda 2030. He also worked on projects about cyber governance with the Swiss federal government. I'm pretty sure he'll bring quite a different perspective on governance, or what really governance can look in a better way going forward. To join us, that's great to have you on.
Thank you for having us.
So I want to start, Raj, with you. You're a governance consultant. Explain to our viewers, what do we understand as a governance consultant?
Well, that's a pretty broad word. Basically, I've been into the tech industry for about over 20 years now, and started off by, building in the year 2000 cyber administration solutions that basically help government deliver public services to citizens and businesses. And that's part of the role of government to deliver public services. That would be, I think, one starting point of traditional view of government and governance, although it's not necessarily the same thing. Currently today, corporations also have to play a role in the governance of society, not only the population, but also of the environment, and collectively how we play a role towards the Sustainable Development Goals. So I'll just stay there for the moment,
Yeah, so that's basically, you're saying that we're all stakeholders, so that every stakeholder has to play a role, and we have to understand how they can kind of come in and contribute in all of this.
Absolutely.
How did you get into this? So what caught your interest in this field?
Well, I'm born in Singapore, and we're considered to be a very efficient an efficient, a miracle of economic development in Southeast Asia. And when I looked at other countries around the world, I always wondered why they couldn't leapfrog like how Singapore could. And that had already been my initial call for understanding in how the role of efficient government or efficient governance can basically create thriving societies, promote economic and sustainable development, and so that was my starting point. And then as a student of economics and development economics in particular, that subject became more and more interesting in the years that led afterwards.
So I do need to pick up on one point, though. So you said you looked at Singapore. Why can other nations not leapfrog in the way Singapore could? So would you consider then Singapore as the golden standard?
Well, I think it's it's a big question again. What would be the standard in terms of where we are going towards a society? But if you look at in terms of economic opportunities of Singapore in the 60s, which had no natural resources and was able to provide jobs and employment opportunities, and basically built the nation in 25 years, which 25 years in other countries, they're still locked down somewhere. So what makes it so special? Why is Singapore able to have such a high growth rate and be an attraction to the global economy, which is something very similar to Switzerland as well. No natural resources, a lot of human capital, and how we can outstand and outshine many other countries around the world. And that makes it special. And I'm sure there are shadow sides to all countries that that we can deep dive into if need be. But I think economic development is definitely one of the most important role of government to provide human security, employment, health, and so on and so forth.
Okay, actually on this one I'm going to challenge you in a little bit, but I do want to get to Rami first, because I think, economic development isn't really the job of the government. I think, did you mean to facilitate economic development?
Well, I mean, one could say that, economic development is not the role of the government, but the government does facilitate, does provide, the infrastructure, the regulatory framework, the policy development, and foresight in terms of which industry should be developed, and how that, how the education policies should be aligned to the industrial development of the country.
Yeah,
so
but if
how do
we
you
take
move?
these standards, Raj, though, I will say that I think we're in pretty bleak. We're pretty bleak states when you look at having the government taking a lead in education and having the government taking a lead in sort of which industries have to develop, and talking about foresight and government. Those to me are not even on the same map.
Yeah. I mean, this is the current paradigm when we have lost trust in government. So when we have lost trust in government, then what you say becomes true, because government no longer plays the role as a governing body of the collective of society, but is sort of like captured by the corporation. So then there's a loss of trust. And then we try to, have that different balance view between we want minimal government, more private sector, but in general, countries which have succeeded to manage their resources often have, a uniform approach to government and to governance of the nation and its natural resources, be it, those underground or human resources.
So I'm hearing you say a little bit that we also need to redefine the role of the government, etc., which actually then brings me kind of to Rami here to see how we can sort of navigate that. Rami, you wrote a book, I have it right here. It's called U-Cube, The Tridimensional Language of Reality. It's right here. It says it's a new philosophy and universal language for the third millennia. Of course, everybody says, so what's the universal language of the new millennia? To give it a short answer, before I'm going to ask you how you got to write the book, what would you say as the short answer?
Well, it's something that we have inside us. We already speak this language, only it's not evident. We are. It's something that we were born, since before we were born. We know this language. When you are when we are in your mother's womb, you already know the rhythm. There's something that you already know, the rhythm. The rhythm is connected to the heart of the mother. So you are already understanding these three-dimensional realities. Of course, as we grow up, we start losing them, because you're exactly right. Because of the education system, we get polarized between, religion polarizes you, good and evil, and everything, good and bad. And since you are a kid, no, don't touch this, and yes, when it's a price. So we start losing this three-dimensionality we have in us. And the book just tries to recover it, to show people how to think again as if they were children. And it's funny that you say about polarization, because that's exactly how I stumped into this. Some 30 years ago, maybe, there was a philosopher called Francis Fukuyama, and he said that we had reached the end of history, because man had discovered, got to what he called liberal democracy, which was basically democracy in terms of politics and free market in terms of economics. So according to him, that was the end of history. But it's funny, because 150 years earlier, another guy called Karl Marx also predicted the end of history, but in the other side of the spectrum. not with democracy, but with the dictatorship of the proletariat, and not with free markets, but with the economy controlled in the hands of the state.
Let me ask you something. So when you talk about Marx sort of coming, you mentioned a pretty strong word, dictatorship of the proletariat. Do you think that was really his intent when he set out with that? Or is this, in hindsight, now that we look at it and we say 2020, this is kind of where it was?
He was really thinking about one big government that controls everything, including the means of production and including everything. And of course, it was a utopia. He thought that everybody could have the same motive, right? And every human is different, and I think that's but they both forgot another dimension, which is, okay, fine, now we have democracy and we have free markets, but where are the fruits of this? Okay, who gets the fruits of this? So, it's a good example now. We have democracy, we have markets, but the fruits are being concentrated into just a few, right?
Well, that's maybe because we don't have pure democracy. See, I think that a lot of this comes from the purity of the thought model.
Correct.
And we think we have democracy, but I think we're learning more and more that what we have is not pure democracy.
Exactly. But the point is that it wasn't the end of history, right? Yeah. He predicted the end of history, but now it turns out that it's not the end of history. Why? Because those guys were thinking only on two dimensions, the economic and the political dimension. They never understood that there's a third dimension. So what do we do things for? And that's the social dimension. And that's what UCube really underlines, that we are really missing this humane and social dimension for the political, for the economic.
Now, let me ask you something. Do you think that Marx, for example, sort of stopped thinking that this dictatorship was the end of all means, or did he have in mind, sort of internally thinking that the state would at some point wither away and it would transform into something else, but it didn't?
Probably just like Fukuyama thought that the markets were efficient in distributing wealth, and they both failed, right? So now we know that the markets are not very efficient at distributing wealth because, I mean, just you have to, okay, you can also argue, well, it's not the markets, it's the imperfection of the markets, right?
Well, but actually, I think it's more the meddling with the markets versus the imperfection
and same with the politics.
The
but they've been telling us that it is free market, right? They've been telling us that this is a democracy. So we have to take, okay, this is a democracy, this is a free market, yet the fruits of this beautiful democratic and market system are in the hands of a few. Right? 4 or 5 people control more wealth in this country than 50-60% of the rest of the country. That cannot be. And that is a proof that the end of history is not here yet. Okay? For the end of history to be here, we need exactly that new universal language where we all speak the same, and that's something that we all have it inside.
So you're saying that we know that we are tri-dimensional beings. We know there is a mental part, well, actually 4-dimensional. We're quadrupolar magnets, so to speak. So there's the spiritual side, there's the mental side, there's an emotional side, there's the physical side. So that alone is 4, which means that's correlating to the cube.
Yeah. I mean, look, this is very polarization, which is what you said. It's between black and white. Right? So here's the cube, and here you have the black, and this is the white, okay? So this is God, this is devil. This is good, this is evil, right?
Okay, but the first one, I'm going to say God and Satan as seeing as opposites is not correct.
But fine, but this is the way. But it turns out that black, it's the combination of 3 colors, which is green, red, and blue. The RGB colors, okay? These 3 colors combine into creating black. Now, each of these colors has an opposite color, Okay, so opposite color of green is magenta, opposite color of blue is yellow, and opposite color of red is cyan. And the colors cyan, magenta, and yellow, they form white. So black and white are not opposite because of the grace of anything. They are opposite because that's the way nature has them set up.
In the physical realm.
In the physical realm.
Right.
So when we do black and white, we're ignoring everything else. And I think that's what you meant when you said in the beginning about the polarization. And this is what this book does. It shows you that there is really a third dimension that has been neglected, right? Has been neglected.
Yep. Raj, would you, I know you also, I think you also call yourself a digital shaman in a way. So would you, and I know you also feel very strongly about another dimension sort of to come in. How do you see this whole, is it, are we still too much in the physical and are neglecting this other dimension? Do very few people know about it? Or is it just that we're already in this new paradigm, but we still operate in the old, like on the old assumptions and the old rules?
Well, that's many questions in a single question. I like the cube that Nico had Rami had shown. When we speak about polarization, we speak about extremities, and we can look at extremities as presented, and we can also look at extremities in terms of centralization and decentralization. And over the last, let's say, decades, we've been increasingly being centralized, increasingly being concentrated, increasingly having a single truth for all truths. And we impose that as the reality. So decisions are made at a hyper-centralized space and then imposed as a specific truth in all parts of the country or even parts of the world. And that creates a polarization. So we have a loss of biodiversity, the biodiversity of colors, the biodiversity of frequencies. And I guess this is one of the pain points that we are currently facing, not only within the country, like in the US, a large country, but also across continents and at a planetary level. Can we have a single authority that is defining what life has to be and how it should be across the world? Do we need to enforce a McDonald's or a Coca-Cola in each country to say that they are integrated into the global economy? And I think this forcing of concentrative powers, has been one of the major difficulties. So there's always the countries which are producing and the countries which have to be consumed or consuming. There are always the resource extraction that goes up, the hierarchy into the developed countries, and then the goods get produced and then gets pushed back as consumer goods across the world, so that we have a singular consummation economy. And I think these are the larger problems, and through that we are killing the biodiversity of languages. UNESCO has got a catalog of languages which are being destroyed. I think every year there are multiples of languages which are being lost. So through the loss of languages, we are also losing the ability to think. We are losing the stories, the narratives which makes up our humanity. So we lose meaning and we get disconnected, and we are connected to a single authority. And I guess this is this major polarity which is being created, and this concentration is basically, it's like a black hole which is just absorbing everything into a hyper concentrated space. And you can see that also with the wealth concentration. You could say there's a polarity of wealth between the haves and the have-nots, or the ultra rich and
when you consider that 1% and 99%, that's pretty.
So that's
yeah.
That's a major polarity, and it's linked a lot with the concentration. And linked a lot with the centralization. So the global economy has been more and more connected, and the more connected they get, the more concentrated they become. The monetary policies of each country are, connected more and more and more. So decisions can no longer be made at national levels or decentralized levels. And so there's an extraction of wealth, extraction of biodiversity, extraction of potentiality. And then when we think about sustainable development, we're like, okay, so what's the solution? Now we need to get people to act. But people can't act anymore because everything is so centralized. So that's where we start.
So it's tipped, and that's exactly the point. It is tipped when there is so much concentration. It has tipped, but I think there's actually more to this. I think that it has a lot to do with the fact that we have a very mechanistic worldview of the human right now, which tends to, when you go back actually in the Middle Ages, so when you look back in the really ancient times, there was the human being, and everyone understood there were three parts to the human being. So then when we got into the Middle Ages, and actually before the Middle Ages a little bit, so the church declared at some point that the human isn't body, mind, and soul, but it's only body and soul. So we took the mind out. And then later, when you look into the industrialization age, it was the opposite. So we kind of said, well, the human really is body and mind, but we lost the soul. So in both cases, we've kind of lost that third dimension, which now we're in a time where we more and more realize, wait a minute, we start asking the why questions. There is more to life than just what we've been presented. And so people do reconnect back with seeing this other part. And when you think about, we talk about all these things in the physical, but when you know that everything has a polar opposite, then logically, if you have the visible, there's got to be the invisible.
Yeah.
And the invisible is what we're forgetting.
Polarization is natural. It's in nature. It's everywhere.
Well, because everything that exists has to exist in opposite, so it cannot exist in the physical
but
realm.
also because everything has mass, and when you have mass and you have energy, and when you have energy is either positive or negative energy, right? But mostly is balanced energy that sometimes it's positive and sometimes it's negative, right?
That's right. The balance comes from us. It's to recognize that nothing is in vain. The question becomes, how can we transcend that? So I want to talk a little bit more about the cube. How can we actually work with the cube to visualize how we can transcend things? I know, Rami, you've done some work, and we actually have some graphics. Let's start maybe with, what's the easiest one? Let's start with the love cube. I think that's the easiest one, to explain how you work with the cube, and then we can talk a little bit in how that would apply to us, and if we can actually apply this in day-to-day life. Can we show the graphic, the image of the love cube? I think it was image 4 or 5 on the screen. Well, start talking a little bit about it. Here it is right on the back here.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about how you laid it out and how you worked through the cube and what it does.
Okay. Before that, I'm going to go quickly into what you said. We have really three essences. We have the material essence, which is what makes us equal to animals or to this object, right? We occupy space, we occupy volume, so we have a material essence, and that. Then we have a reason. We have reason. That's what distinguishes from animals. So we have a mind, and so that's the second essence that we have, right? And the third one is we have a spirit, right? A moral essence, like you said. So we have the body, the mind, and the spirit, okay? Now, what the cube does is that it equates these metaphysically to things that we do on our everyday, right? So we always graph the material essence, which is, as I said, what equals us to animals. That's the blue line. That's always the base. Then the reason, the rationale essence, it's what we call the game, right? And the spiritual essence is what we call the motive. So what we do here is each of the essences has an extreme. Okay, so it's polarized. So when you're talking about passion, you have on one side, you have death. You've met these people that they don't want to do anything. You know, they're always, they have no, right? And then on the other hand, you have people that are very libidinous, okay? Then, so when it comes to love, the game, and if you think about, you know, a couple, a marriage, the game of love is passion. I mean, the rule of love is passion. Without passion...
I think that's a very subjective way of looking at it.
Well, I mean, look...
But walk us through. So these are the assumptions you made. Walk us through.
Yeah, okay. Same. When it comes to the game, you have the both extremes, okay? Let's call it the yin and the yang. So you have, in intimacy, you can go from a very open relationship where you tell your couple everything and you know everything about it, or other ones where you keep secrets so that is the name, the game. And commitment is if you have common projects or you don't have common project, if you are your own. Now, consummated love is one that has everything, okay? It has the passion, which is the libido, it has complicity, and it has commitment, okay? And
so this is on your cube. If we did this as an analogy to get from white to black, it encompasses everything.
Exactly. So if let's say if your relationship is here, you have to work on the physical part, you have to work on the mental part, and you have to work on the spiritual part, on the emotion, and then you start moving from chaos to order. Okay, these are this is the polarity, chaos and order. Okay, and so you have all here. You have 8 types of love. So you have consummated love that has everything, but you have, for example, a love that it's only passion. It has no complicity and no common projects. That's probably the love between 2 lovers, right? I don't even want to know your name, right? Then you have another one that's complicity. So complicity is more like friendship, okay? Complicity, it's with your friends. Your friends know everything about you, but you have no physical relation with them and you have no common projects, right? And so you can map here all the types of love, and you can do it also with economics. If instead of passion you put there stability, if instead of game you put there wealth creation, and if instead of commitment you put there distribution, you get all the models. You get.
But what does that tell me, though? What does that model tell me?
Well, first of all, it tells you that you need to transit also from chaos. Always you're in some sort of chaos. It doesn't matter where you are in the cube, you're not here, which is order, right? So you have to transit. And this is an algorithm that helps you transit from whatever chaos you are. So let's say that you are in a love relationship that it's friendship, okay? How am I going to transit to the other type of love, to consummate love, if that's what you want to, right? If that's what you want to do.
So in essence, you're basically explaining, though, that based on the cube, you can change from chaos to order by changing all of the different vibrations or to the different vibrational spheres of each of these steps to actually get to the whole.
Exactly. So yeah, you have to move in three directions, because otherwise you're not in synchronicity with the three-dimensional world that travels in space. All right. So it's like when you solve the cube, the Rubik cube.
Right.
The first thing that you do is you put one of the sides the same color. Okay, now I have this order on one of the 6 sides. Yeah, well, you have to destroy that order in order to go and attend chaoses in the other side. But this is the funny thing. The Rubik Cube has, I think it's 512 trillion different chaoses and only one order. Okay? Now, if you know the drill, you can solve it in 23 moves. If you don't know the drill, you can take 23 years and you'll never solve the Rubik Cube, right? So this is exactly what it is. It's an algorithm that helps you in this three-dimensional world that travels in space.
So if we take this, and we take this as thinking in terms of tri-dimensional, if we think about the economics in a tri-dimensional way, Raj, could you see how we would apply that? What's missing in our current approach in economics that is not making it a tridimensional approach?
Well, it's difficult for me to understand the question or even attempt to answer that.
Let me ask you this way.
I can tell you quickly.
Let me phrase it differently. What do you think is currently, what are we neglecting in our economic approach currently that is so far off of putting the human at the center? Let me ask you this way.
Well, the current economic system has basically, led us to the world that we live in, for better or for worse. So to a certain extent, we've reduced a lot of, extreme poverty. We've got iPhones, and we've got AI, and so there's a lot of goods in there. But it's also created a lot of disparity and a lot of inequality, and it has at the same time destroyed our environment. So this economic system that we have in place is no longer considered sustainable, and we are trying to find a way out to make it sustainable. And this lack of sustainability has, brought us to, this state of, I can't even say if we are in chaos or if we are in order at the current moment with the COVID crisis. But so are we fit for the future? Are we fit for a thriving planet? Are we fit for all humanity to thrive collectively? I think that would be the question. I wouldn't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater to say that economics is not working, or capitalism is not working, or all our democracy is not working. I mean, they're not just basically not adapted. I mean, it took us to it was a boat that took us to where we are here today, and today we are waking up to a broken architecture that is no longer fit for future. So we're currently waking up to the environmental problems. We're currently waking up to the lack of sustainable development, to ending poverty, to gender equality, to improving our education, to make sure that people around the world can thrive on this spaceship Earth. And so that's where we are. We're like how to integrate with the new elements that we are considering, and we can no longer just go on a pure profit model of economics and of the capitalist system, and how do we have a shared prosperity model? And I guess this is where we are. I mean, this is sort of like this great reset that we are currently in the midst of. If things were working so well, why do we need a reset? And if we are having a reset, what does it mean about the state of the economics in our society. So I think that's what I would say. I don't think we have a clear model forward, but we do have a model which has it took us from A to B.
In a linear way, which is exactly that duality that we have right now. A to B is a linear way. It's not a viable system. It's to get from A to B. So the thing is, though, but there are governing principles that make a system a viable system. They're out there. Nature has it. Every living organism has it. We just need to learn from that and reflect it and stop thinking in terms of these classic hierarchical A to B linear structures, because it's not linear.
It's not. This is the answer that the cube gives you, okay?
Yeah.
Every economy has to do three things. Stability, it has to generate wealth, and it has to distribute wealth. Who's here? Here is a country that grows, that has stability, growth, and distribution. Here, let's put Switzerland, right? Where Raj is, okay? This is Switzerland up here. It's an economy that it's stable, grows, and distributes wealth, okay?
Hang on a second, is that the case, Raj? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, compared to many other countries around the world, yes.
Okay. Here, we have the United States. This is an economy, there's stability, although we are losing it.
Yeah.
Because now they have inflation. A way of measuring stability is inflation. So instead of guarding the stability, right, and trying to keep inflation, which is basically keeping the rules of the game set. Now we have inflation, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. But let's say that we don't have inflation. A year ago, the United States was here because it was a country that was creating wealth, that had stability, was creating wealth, but was not distributing wealth, okay? Here's a country that that has just stability. This happens when they put countries in shock treatment. Okay, stop your economy, stop everything. We need to do a shock treatment to your economy, and so now we have economies like China here. Okay, let me put this China. China has stability. Has stability. And China has stability, generates wealth, and is distributing wealth also. It's not a market; it's a dictatorship. Okay, and then we have countries that are down here that they're destroying wealth, they have instability, and they concentrate wealth also. Okay, so. The question
is, how do we actually get to and transcend all of this polarity? And this is what I'm actually getting at. So when we look at something as a viable system, which also what you just explained on the cube, it said, the United States, then we have inflation coming on, etc., which isn't, by the way, only in the United States. We have inflation in Europe and in other places too. So that kind of shows, though, when we meddle with things and we add some impurity to pure mechanisms, ideas, and thoughts, that by definition then gets out of control a little bit. And that's what a viable system actually does differently to a system that has this mechanistic view of doing things, versus a viable system really is an organism. It focuses on life. It changes with life. It sees where things come. So we have. I do want to show a little bit sort of like where the cube's coming from and how this works. So when you look at the flower of life, I'm going to hold this in the camera. The flower of life is kind of like, this is the main structure of the base structure of the universe. And then, I guess we can't zoom in here now, but I'll show later. And then out of the flower of life, then you have the cube, you have the all these other geometric forms. They come out of that, including the eye, but they all come out of the base structure.
Yeah.
I like what you're saying, and the comparison within China and the US. Of course, China has been really successful at reducing high levels of poverty and shaping its economy, and including right now reducing the number of millionaires or billionaires in the country to create more equal or egalitarian society as compared to the US, which is built a lot on historically on the exploitation of indigenous lands, on the slave labor, and very pyramidal, concentrated society, which at the same time speaks for freedom, the freedom to do and to thrive around the world, but yet its own populations have lack of freedom, have lack of access to healthcare, have high levels of inequality in different regions. But of course, it's also a diverse society, right? Which is unlike the Chinese society, which has managed to singularize its population. With China has literally abolished many of the languages of the Chinese culture because there's no Chinese language. It's made it Mandarin. So it's sort of like, killed the language biodiversity. So each country is organically searching for its future space of thriving, not only at the local level, but also at the global level. So what do we want to say about the US today? How can it grow forward today when a lot of its growth is coming out from the military industrial complex and around the globe rather than domestically? So what should be done domestically? How can we harness the power of the American population, which are very well educated? Is the centralized government the best way to drive policy for sustainable development? Or is there another way? Should it be decentralized from the bottom up?
But the actual origin is decentralized. But the United States was set up actually in a decentralized way. There's a lot more power to the states. This is right now there is this move to get more towards a more centralized way.
Yeah.
But the origin was actually decentralized.
No, look, it's another thing that the cube explains very well. Like why they cannot see each other anymore, Republicans
actually, we
and
have
Democrats.
a graphic on that. Let me show this because we took one of your graphics. Maybe we can show that on the Republican and the Democrat side. Why they sort of where they gridlock. That would be great. Can we show that, please? There we go.
Yeah. Okay, let's focus on one because they're basically the same cube. So when it comes to the rules, which is the body, the material essence of a country, the rules, the Republicans, for them, the order is to keep the Constitution as it is. Touch it as least as possible. Please don't touch the Constitution. Okay, don't touch it. Democrats, on the other hand, they are more prone to do reforms. Now they want to reform the Supreme Court and they want to reform everything. Okay, so we have there on two opposite sides. When it comes to the game, the Republicans want a small government, or at least that's what they said. Okay, whenever they're in government, they keep growing, but at least in their speech, they say that they want a small government, and the Democrats want a big government. Okay, and when it comes to the motive, in the case of the Republicans, they still want this that everything gyrates around the individual, right? And the Democrats are more around the collective. Okay, so.
But none of them is wrong. That's my point. Because you need the human-centered means individual, but you also, when you look at the whole, then you want to, see it on a more collective basis. But
what I'm trying to say is not that. What I'm trying to say is what it's ordered for the Republicans is chaos for the Democrats.
Yeah.
So for the Republicans, order is the rules as written, small government, and individualism, right? Yeah. And for the Democrats is constant reform, big government, and collectivism. Okay, and they are, so those are the polars, the chaos and the order.
Yeah.
Now, they used to come to terms, right? They used to come to terms. They used to find each other in the middle. But now they are polarizing and polarizing and polarizing. So now if the Republicans say don't change the Constitution, the other ones are going to change it probably just because the Republicans say don't change it.
Well, that's
right?
kind of what I meant in my intro. We're stuck on polarity
Exactly.
and can't transcend.
And this explains you very well why we are stuck in polarity and why there is no
But I
way.
want to know how we transcend. Everybody knows that we're stuck. Now the question is, how do we transcend?
Well,
the political system is broken, right? I mean, that's obvious, especially if you look under the COVID crisis. So what's happening? Who is proposing what solution? Democrats or Republicans? Same thing across different countries. And then how are the regional government or state governments behaving in terms of, implementing the COVID policies? So I think we're the system is like splitting apart. You can't force it. You can't force it.
Exactly. You can't
Some
force it.
solutions
Yep.
have to be built, locally where lives matter and
Yep.
cannot just be at a political level. For the last so many years, I mean, the Republicans or Democrats, no matter who is in charge, who has the power, it's the same thing. America's still gone to war, no matter who, nothing has really changed on the ground for anybody. So it's like, what are we really talking about? How do we transcend to real conversations which make real differences rather than political discourses at very federal levels?
Exactly. Which is why I really like this approach with the cube particularly, because I think it showcases that once we all understand, and I mentioned that a little bit at the intro, I think once we all understand that opposites are part of a natural, everything in nature has opposites. So we know they're opposites. I don't have to agree with you, but I respect you where you're at, and you respect me at where I'm at. That sort of takes this gridlock and being stuck, first of all, out, and you kind of can look at, well, let's look at all these other little cubes and shapes, because these are not the only ones, but there are all these different shades of color in between that we can actually go through. This is the transformation part. It's sort of when we all hold on it and we just see that linear part, this A to B, black and white, then we can't see all these other spectrums. That's where everybody is stuck, because I bet if you actually use that and you ask people in what we all look for or what we all want, what people would kind of all want and what we all seek in life has sort of a pretty close inner center that I think for most of us, and that's independent of where you live, is probably very much similar in that circle. So it's sort of like accepting that opposites, they're not bad, but they are a starting point, and you kind of work out and go through those different shades and vibrations and essences. That's how we can transcend.
Yeah, and what the cube tells you is that between black and white, there aren't shades of gray. Between black and white, there's all these colors.
That's right, it's a lot of color.
Okay, there's a lot of colors. So the shades of gray are only here in this middle line here. See the white, and then there's another gray and another, and then you get to the black. But no, and all the colors, they are playing together. Okay?
I like that approach, that all the colors are playing together.
Exactly.
We only have 4 minutes left, believe it or not. So Rami, I do want to ask you here for a second. If we use the cube, and if we apply it to our daily life, we all have pretty held opinions and viewpoints on things. Can everyone, including our viewers, can you actually work with the cube at home just to get your bearings straight and figure sort of out where you're stuck and how you can possibly transcend the way you look at things?
Yeah, let me put an example on the economic that I just explained.
Yeah.
You can very easily say, okay, this is, we have let's say we have a 6% inflation, we have 2% economic growth, and we have this Gini index, okay? So we are here. So yes, in essence, you can not only model how do you say, you can also take numbers. For certain things you can take numbers. For example, back in the Cube of Love, you have to ask hard questions. Like, how many times do I have intimacy? Right?
I was going to say, don't go there. We're on public television.
No,
but all right.
But you have to ask. Sometimes you have to ask our questions. But yes, you can certainly use this to model, and not only, first of all, to identify where are you, and then what are the things that you need to do in order to get wherever you want to get.
So
which
your
is
three pillars, though, were in terms of what's the game,
body, mind and soul.
Yes, but
rules, game, and motive. Independent, dependent, and governing variable. It's the same thing. So the rules is the politics, the game is the economics, the soul is the social.
But when you do this by yourself, basically, what you're saying is you're going to have to figure out, so how do I, and that goes back into belief systems. So you have to ask yourself, so if I'm stuck in a certain opinion, you're going to ask yourself, first of all, what are the rules I'm playing by, or what my subconscious is actually playing by, because that's what you react to. And then what's sort of my body saying, and then sort of what's the why. So in other words, if the soul is not if your emotions are not aligned with the thinking, then you're going to feel a disharmony and discrepancy in the body.
Yeah, but look, let's do it with a game of tennis. Okay, I invite you to play tennis. We know the rules, right? So we know the rules. Now we play the game.
Yeah. Okay. I do need to move on here a little bit because we're almost out of time, and I did want to give Raj another chance here to talk a little bit about the future of governance, because we have only about 1.5 minutes left. Raj, what do you think are the three most important elements we should think of when we think in terms of future governance? What are sort of must-haves to have there?
Well, I really love this conversation, and Rami's Cube is really amazing. And I think we've barely just touched upon this. Yeah. But I think we really need to do a lot more deep listening. Mm. We need to listen to the diversity of colors, you know, between the black and the white, the 50 shades of gray. And, you know, by doing this deep listening, we will be able to better design solutions, and not just a left or right solution, but more adapted solutions that, you know, are fit for purpose and fit for context at local levels, at decentralized levels. And, you know, so that will be the pathway. There will be no one solution coming from a centralized winner approach that takes it all, but rather to rebuild diversity ground up. And that's how we're going to be able to build up Spaceship Earth as we move forward into the future.
Exactly.
Thank you so much.
I love that, and it really has to do a lot. It really has to do a lot with. It starts with respecting one another and respecting the diversity and ideas of one another. Thank you so much for both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. I know this was quite a journey, but it is a very important dialogue that we all sort of have to get into. I would encourage you to, you know, read up on the YouTube. You can certainly do that. I'm sure Rami would. You can see it on our Facebook page as well, so you can get a little detail information on that. And we see you next week. Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was really good, but you see how fast time flew, because it's like, and you're right, Raj, we only touched like on the top of it, and it was a full hour.
Just barely. Just barely. I think it's really interesting. I think we could almost do a second session with the cube in understanding how we are able to extract information